Hey guys, Josiah here from EasyCaters.com, and today's video is just going to be walking you through exactly how to make your first indicator in Thinkorswim using the ThinkScript language. What we'll do in this video is go through and create a range indicator showing the range of each bar on the chart and allowing you to compare when volatility spikes versus when volatility contracts. And we'll also create an average for that. And so you can see what the average range of each bar is. And then we'll create some color schemes and an alert system to go with that. So you'll be able to see a lot of the different features and functions of ThinkScript come together to create something that's really useful and that you can integrate into your trading system. So to get started, we'll go in here into the Edit Studies and Strategies window here. And I just have one indicator loaded, which is my relative volume indicator. I use that on all my charts. But we're going to create our own new blank study. In future videos, I'll probably be covering how to create your own strategy, how to create your own custom scan filter, and how to create your own custom column to give you a certain quote or value in a watch list. But for today, we're just going to go over studies. If I was going to do a strategy today, I would switch over to the strategy sub-tab here and click create here. Since I'm wanting to create a study, I need to be on this study sub-tab, and then I'll create a study from there. Now you've got your name up here at the top. We'll just call this my first study, and I'll put a few A's in the front so it goes to the top of my list. And then, so you can see here, we've just got a blank template here that just says plot data close. And what that says is we're going to plot the closing price of each bar onto the screen. And so if I hit OK, you can see it shows my name here that I just gave it. It has a little asterisk saying that it's not actually applied to the chart yet. You can see that it did show up in my studies list here. And if we hit apply, then it will show up on the chart. And you can see it's basically just a line graph of the chart. Now, one thing to note here is that indicators can be either upper price graph indicators or lower subgraph indicators. Down here in this lower section, if you click and drag it down, you can see what that looks like. And so that's what a lower subgraph indicator would look like. You can also have a special indicator on a volume subgraph. That's a special type of subgraph in Thinkorswim where volume shows, but I actually have it hidden on the current chart. I can drag it there, and you can see if I hit apply, it disappears. Well, that's because I don't have volume turned on for my equities charts currently. So if I go over here into equities in the chart settings, this gear icon, and I can click Show Volume Subgraph. And now you see the volume subgraph shows up, and you see something else. There's you can't actually see it very well, but if as I move this, you can see a little line showing up. It's such a small value compared to the volume values that it's hidden down at the bottom. It's barely visible. You can see as I mouse over the screen, the value is showing up here in the data box. And so it is showing up here in this volume subgraph area. But that's not very useful for us, so we're going to go ahead and drag it back down to the lower subgraph, which is where we're going to use it today. So we'll right-click the name here and choose Edit Sources, and that brings up the editor window. And so now, instead of just plotting the closing price, which I already have a graph of, I want to plot the range of each candle itself, what the range is, so I can compare ranges between candles. So the first thing we need to do is define what the range is. Well, the way you do that in ThinkScript is very simple. You use the def keyword, which stands for define, and we define a variable, and we'll just call it range. And within the variable of range, we want to store the range of each bar. And so we're going to define what that is. And what that is going to be, in this case, the high minus the low. Now, each line in ThinkScript needs to be ended with a semicolon, as you can see here, and that tells it that that's the end of the line. So what we've done here is we said define a variable called range and make that range variable equivalent to high minus low. It's essentially assigning this value to this variable. Now, defining a variable doesn't actually do anything. Nothing new is going to show up on the chart here. We're just going to still plot the data, which is the close. So that's not very useful. What I want to do is instead plot this new range variable. So I'm going to replace close with the new keyword that I just created, range, and hit apply and see what that does. So you can see the graph change down here. Let's expand this a little bit. And so now you can see, okay, stock price got very volatile over here, and it was pretty tame over here. So if we go back in here into edit sources, we can continue here. So you can see we've already changed this to our special calculation here of high minus low. We can also get a little bit more complicated. So there's some things in ThinkScript that you want the user to be able to control, not just the programmer. And so for that, you have a keyword called input. And input allows the user to actually change a setting without having to go into the code here, and they can change how something is calculated in the indicator itself. In this case, what I can do is say input, let's call it range high price equals, and we're going to say high. Then I'm going to put another input for range low price equals low. So now what I've done is I've set this to high and low by default, but the user can now actually change these, what's stored in this variable, to whatever they want within a list of available values. And now what I want to do, and just to show you that actually, we'll go out here into the properties and show you that these are two options now that appear. It's already made range high price. It's already put spaces between it and everything. That's a nice thing about Thinkorswim. And this allows the user to change the high price and the low price. Now this doesn't do anything yet. It just stores those values in these variables. To make them actually do something, we're going to take these names and we're going to, instead of using just the plain high and low for the range, we're going to use whatever price the user told it wanted to use. So now you can see here we're basically taking some input from the user. We're using that input to calculate the range, and then we're plotting the range to the chart here. And you can see nothing changes, but if I go out here, now we've connected all this, and I can change the high price of the range to the close. And so now that does actually change the output here. So the user could theoretically look at, say, the distance between the open and the close instead of the high and the low. And so that's a different type of range that someone could look at. To do that, though, we would want to make sure that it's the absolute value of the open and the close, because sometimes the open is above the close and sometimes the open is below the close. So that would result in positive and negative values. So to avoid that, you can use a function called AbsValue, for absolute value. And we're just going to put parentheses after that and encapsulate both this whole value that we created here. And so it just says, take the absolute value of the range high price minus the range low price and store that in range. And then down here, we're taking range and plotting it to the screen. So whereas previously we could have gotten some negative values out here if we had used close and open, now they should all be positive values. So that's just a little tidbit about how to deal with absolute values and negative values. All right, so we've got three of the most important things in ThinkScript: inputs, definitions, and plot statements. Let's give this plot statement a name that's actually meaningful here. In fact, let's change range to range with just an abbreviation RG. And let's change the plot to range, the full word. And what that does is makes it a little friendlier to the user. The programmer is using this abbreviation in the back end, but the front end is using the name range, which is a little bit more understandable to the user. So it's just a better practice to use. And so what we can do here, if we go into properties, we can click show plot names, turn that on, and now you can see as I mouse over here, it uses the word range as I'm mousing over, and it's telling you what the value is. Instead of it saying RG there, which is an abbreviation which some users might not understand, this way it actually spells it all out for the user and makes it a little bit easier for them. So that's a good practice, to keep in mind, is using abbreviations for the programming in the back end, but full words for the outputs. All right, so we've got our raw value here, just the range of each bar. And at this point, what we want to do is create an average of that value. So we've got the raw value. We want to do a calculation on that value and create an average. For that, we're going to need a few things. We're going to need A, the value itself, which we have. B, we're going to need an averaging method or type of average, such as simple moving average, exponential moving average, etc. And C, we're going to need the length or number of bars over which we calculate that average. We can also add in an additional thing which is called the offset, which allows you to evaluate the prior bar's average on the current bar or something like that. We'll go over that as we move forward here. So to actually create the average, let's create a new variable. And so whereas we had a previous variable called range as an abbreviation, let's abbreviate this to average. And we will say the average is going to be the moving average, and this is calling a function called moving average. This is referencing a function. A function is basically a snippet of code elsewhere in the system that Thinkorswim has already written for us that we're just feeding some data into it and it's spitting back some data to us. And then we're making use of that and plotting it to the screen. So that's what a function does. The absolute value is also a function. And so we've sent the range to it and it sent us back the absolute value of that range. Moving average, we're going to send it those three items of information that I just went over, and it's going to send us back the average based on that information. And the good thing about Thinkorswim and the ThinkScript editor here is that they have a little inspector over here on the right-hand side that tells you exactly what this function requires. This is the name of the function, and you can look up a little bit of explanation on it here. It tells you the three different items of information that it needs and in what order it needs those to appear in. And it also gives you that offset, which allows you to slide it forward and backward in time that I mentioned. So if we put the cursor into the parentheses here, we can see the order that we need to type in. And so we can go ahead and say, all right, I want average type dot simple. And I want the data that we're actually averaging to be the range that we just created. And then the length, maybe I want it to be 10. And then for the offset setting, you can actually click over here, and you can do this for any of them, but you can click plus to add an offset here, and it shows you how it wants that to appear. It wants it to appear in brackets over here on the right, and that means 1 bar ago. If we put 0 here, that would mean 0 bars ago, or the current bar. If we put 3, that would be 3 bars ago. So that's the offset setting. So I'm going to leave that at 0 for now. But these are some settings that the user might actually have an interest in altering at some point in the future. So maybe we want to open these up to the user to change in the future. So to do that, we always have to go back here and create inputs. So now I need a new input for the average type. And Thinkorswim is nice in this in that they have a whole list of average types that the user can just select a drop-down menu for and choose the one they want, and it can input it directly into this moving average function. So I could say average type equals average type dot simple. And the capitalization doesn't matter here. That's just how they store it in the system. The next thing we'll need is an input for the average length. And we'll set that equal to 10. And then we'll do average offset equals 0 by default. So now if we go out here into the parameters, we can see we've got new settings here. The drop-down menu for the average types, the length setting, and the offset setting. Now, if I go back here into sources, we need to connect these to the moving average function here. And so all I'm going to do is select that text there and hit Command-C or Control-C on a Windows system. And then I'm going to overwrite this input here. They call it a parameter in programming, with the actual input taken from the user. And I'm going to do the same thing for the length. We've already got the range in here, taken from the calculation we made, and it's influenced by the other settings of the high and the low. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the offset, and just replace that 0 with average offset. And so now we still don't see any new plots on the screen, but now these user inputs are connected to the average calculation and are influenced by the user. Okay, now we need to plot the average to the screen. So let's call this average, again, spelling out the word for the user so they don't have to guess what it means. And in that average plot, we're going to send the average variable to that plot. And so you can see here, now we've got an average plot overlaid, or actually underlaid our raw range plot. Okay, so now maybe we want to change the plot style of some of this. So it kind of makes sense to have the average be a line, but maybe we want the raw value to be a histogram. And in that case, we can go out here to the properties, and you can select the range plot down here in the plot subpanel, and you can change the plot style to any of these available plot styles. And the same thing with the average. You can change it to whatever plot style you want, line thickness that you want, color that you want, and so forth. So all these things are automatically available for the user to change. They can even turn the plots on or off by themselves here with the show plot checkbox. If I want to turn the range off, you can see I just turned that off as the user, not as the programmer. You can turn the bubble over here on the price axis off. If you uncheck that, you can hide the title from the data box. And so you've got a lot of options there for the user to control automatically. But if you want to specify what it looks like by default, without the user having to change any of that, then we can go back in here and change that in the code. Right click, edit sources. And so I can say this range plot, I want to change its style. So I'm going to say range.setPaintingStrategy. And now this accepts a certain argument. And so the type of argument that it needs is a painting strategy argument. Painting strategy dot. And for this, I'll go with a squared histogram. Okay, so now we're saying for the range plot, we want to set the painting strategy to painting strategy type dot squared histogram. For the average, we're just going to leave it as it is by default as a line. That makes sense to me. And so now if we click apply, you can see that we've created a histogram here, and we've got an average overlaid, just kind of like a volume graph with an average, except for this is showing us the average range. So now maybe we want to change the colors. Range dot set default color. That is the way that you set the default color before the user gets a chance to change anything. You can set a default for it, and then they can change it from there if they want. So for this, there are two ways to give it a color. One is to use some of the presets that Thinkorswim has created for us, color.gray. And so we'll hit apply, and you can see it changed it to gray. So there's several keywords already created for you where you can just type in color.that_color, and it will automatically grab the color for that and change the plot color for you. And I should note here, there's a handy reference over here in the right sidebar. And if we go down to constants and click color, there's a whole list of these colors available to you right there. And so you can look up which colors are allowed to be used. So you can see dark_orange, dark_green, dark_gray. There's also light_gray, light_orange. Lots of different colors here that you can choose from. There's another way to create a color if you don't like any of their preset colors though. And that is you can actually use a HTML color picker anywhere on the web, or actually you can use the one built into Thinkorswim. You just go out here to any plot, click the color, click more, brings up the color picker that the user would normally see. You can click RGB here, and then you can drag it around and choose exactly what color you want to see. Then copy those numbers, 255, 80, 206. And we'll just go over here. It's just the first three numbers. We'll say create color 255, 80, 206, I think is what it said. And so now you can see it changed to that color. And this is an RGB color code, red, green, blue. You can see over here in the parameters that are in the inspector, it tells you exactly what it needs, and you can change them over there as well. So this is a way of getting the color dialed into exactly the color you want using the create color function here and feeding it some RGB numbers. Let me get a little bit less loud of a color here, actually, just for my own sake. We'll change that to blue. Okay, that's a little easier on the eyes, maybe. Let's go back into the customizer here and maybe make it a little darker. Maybe make it a little more transparent. This is the alpha setting here. And so you can see what that does. Okay, but you can also see that when I changed the transparency, it made it so you could see the average better in certain areas because the average is actually plotted behind the range. And you can see that because you start with one plot and then Thinkorswim starts plotting the additional plots behind that one. If you want to change the order in which they're plotted, you can just simply move the plot up in the code. And so now you can see that the average range has moved to the front and it's on top of the histogram, and so it's a lot easier to see there. Okay, so now we might want to set a specific color for the average, average.setDefault color, and we'll say color.light.gray. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. All right, so maybe I want to dynamically change the color of the range plot, the histogram, based on whether or not it's above the average, a higher than average range, or whether it's a lower than average range. And to do that, you can't use the set default color here. You have to use range.assignValue color. And so this is a special way of taking a plot and assigning a color based on some logic that you've created. So we'll have to create that logic here. We'll have to say, okay, in this case, I want this color, but in another case, I want the other color. And so we'll keep this simple. We'll just say if, and I'm going to use the variables up here that we created instead of the plot names, but you can use the plot names if you want. If the range is greater than or equal to the average, then color dot, we'll say cyan, else, and then you can say another color, color.gray. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see now the bars that are above the average are cyan colored. The bars that are below are gray colored. And so that allows the ones that are unusually high to stick out and be a little bit brighter for us to see. The next thing you could do is instead say color.current. And what that would do is just whatever the user-defined current color is for the plot, which was this darker blue, which we had a moment ago. If this particular statement is true that the range is above the average, then we're going to choose this special color. But if not, we're going to just go with the default color that it was already set to. So that's what that does, color.current. There are also a couple of additional ones, color.uptick and color.downtick. Let me just show you what those look like. Uptick, so that's a green color, and color.downtick, which is, I think, the theme's default downtick color. So that's how that works. So we'll just leave it at that for now. The average, maybe we want to assign the average a special color scheme based on how it's configured. Maybe if it's rising, if it's a higher average value than the last bar's average value, then we want to color it one way, whereas if it's descending, if the average is going down, then we want to color it another way. So we'll do average.assignValue color if average is greater than or equal to average 1, which is again that offset operator here, like we used up here on the average itself. We're basically saying if the current average, and you could put average 0 here, and that would mean the same thing, or you can just leave it blank. If the current bar's average is greater than or equal to 1 bar ago's average, then color.white, otherwise, else in this case, color dot, we'll call it red. This is going to be a crazy colored indicator, but just go with it. Okay, so you can see here on the bars where the average ascended, we've got white values, and when it descended, we've got red values. Okay, so that takes us through the coloration schemes. One other thing that you can do, though, is actually open the colors up to the user to control the actual color schemes as far as the logic assigning a color one way or the other. Right now, the programmer is the only one that has control over this. You can open this up to the user, and I'll show you how to do that. Range dot define color. And so this is taking that plot, and we're saying we want to define a color just for this plot. It's not going to be used for anything else. And so we're going to create a color high range. We'll just call it high. Color.cyan. And we'll create another one, range.define color low. So this is for a low value. And we'll say color dot, I don't know, blue. And so now we've created 2 new colors for range to use. And the range plot, if we go out here, you can actually see this, I believe. Yeah, so you can see the 2 colors have shown up here for the user to select. Unfortunately, that doesn't do anything yet because it doesn't assign these colors to anything yet. In order to do that, we need to go back in here into our logic and say, instead of color dot whatever I had here a moment ago, I'm going to say range dot color, and then I'm going to say which color I want to use, high. If the range is greater than the average, I want to use range dot color high, else use range dot color low. And we'll hit apply, and you'll see that it changed over here. And now if I go out here, the user can actually define these colors all by themselves without having the programmer to redefine everything for them. So that's how you allow the user to change the color. And we'll just go ahead and do this real quickly for the average as well. Average.define color rising for our rising average. And we'll say color.green. Let's make it light green, light_green. And then we'll say define another color for falling, and we'll say color.light red. All right, so now what we need to do is again assign these colors using the logic that we use in the assign value color setting here. So what we do again here is replace the rising average with the newly defined average.color rising, else average.color falling. And so now the user can control all of that. So average falling, average rising, range high, range low. We've got settings for all of these, and you can see that they've applied on the chart here. Okay, so what else might we need to do with this indicator? Well, maybe somebody wants to be alerted whenever there is a high value plotted on the chart. Maybe we'll say 2 times the average, So what we'll do is we'll say we want an alert. And so this is another function that you can use in Thinkorswim. And so you just type alert with 2 parentheses. And then we'll say, it'll tell you over here exactly what it needs. It needs the condition under which the alert is fired, what triggers it. We want the text that will be displayed and shown up here in the message center. We want the alert type, and there's different alert types. You can alert on the bar, on each bar. You can alert only once and then no more alerts after that, or you can alert on each tick. So if the bar happens to tick above an average and then ticks back down, it would potentially fire multiple alerts per bar in that case. So usually you want to use alert.bar. And then you can choose the sound, and you can see here there's either no sound or bell, ding, ring, or chimes. Those are the available sounds in Thinkorswim. Okay, so we'll give it a condition. We want to say, in this case, we'll start simple and say if the range is above the average, then we will say high range bar, and so that's our text. You can see it appear over here. This is our condition. This is our text. Then we're going to say alert.bar. That's our alert type, how the alert behaves. And then we're going to say sound.ding. And that's just using the dinging sound. And so you can see all these appeared up here in the parameters. And so when there's a high range bar, we should get an alert from that. And I don't know if, maybe I can switch to a chart. Maybe you can hear that. But yeah, so I heard that. I don't know if the video recorded it or not, but so that you can see that there was a message that showed up here in Message Center. Chart alert, Apple, high range bar. There you go. So that gave us our first alert. And so we've got an alert here. But maybe the user wants to be able to control what threshold above the average the range has to be before it gets an alert. Maybe average is not really extreme enough. So maybe we want 2 times the average. So we could put a new input up here for alert average multiple, and we'll say 2 times. And so basically it's saying if the current range is 2 times the average, then we want an alert. And so then we have to redefine this logic down here for the alert and say if the range is greater than or equal to the average times the average, the alert average multiple, which is 2 in this case, then it's going to signal this alert. If it's below that 2 times the average, then it's not going to signal an alert, even if it's above the average. So in this case, that allows the user to come out here and say, okay, I want it to be 1 times the average or 2.5 times the average, different settings like that. So that's a really handy thing to allow. So next, maybe you want to show the current ranges value in a label up here in the top left corner of the graph. Well, we can do that with an add label function. And so if we go in here, you can see what parameters it's looking for, what makes it visible, what text it displays, and what color the label itself is. You can't control the label text color, but you can control the background color. And Thinkorswim just takes care of the text color itself. Okay, so what makes it visible? Well, we just want it to be always visible in this case, but you could make a true or false statement here and say, if this is true, then show the label. If not, then don't show the label. In this case, I'll just put a yes for show the label all the time. And then I'm going to say, what do I want to display in here? Well, I want to show the range as dollars. Now we could put just range here, and that would be fine. I'll show you why you might want to specify how it's displayed in a moment. And then we want to specify a color. And in this case, I'm just going to skip right to it, and I want to allow the user to be able to set the color. Maybe they don't like red. I think the default color in Thinkorswim is red. You can see here it shows the range, the current bar's range, 3.87, 3.87. But by default, it just chooses the color red, and there's no dollar symbol or anything specifying that this is in dollars. So what I can do, I can change the text to be plotted as dollars. Missed an S there. And now you can see that it automatically puts 2 decimal points and a $sign next to it. You can also use AsPercent, and you can see what that does. That actually changes it, multiplies it by 100, and plots that value with a percentage sign. So, and then you can use rounding, you can use the floor function to change the value a little bit, but that's basically how you can alter the output type instead of just using the raw output value. All right, so let me put this back to AsDollars because we're on a dollar denominated chart here. And then I'll say color.white. We'll say the label needs to be color white. Okay, so we've got a white label, but that doesn't allow the user to change it. So now we need to define a color, but this is not a plot. You can't say label.color, label.define color. So you have to define a global color is what it's called. Define global color. And so we'll give this a name. We'll say label. And we'll say color dot, I don't know, let's go with dark orange. Okay, so now we need to assign the label color. So we'll say use the global color called label. And so now you can see it changed to orange. And so now if we go back out here into properties, well, where's the color? Well, it actually shows up in this global subpanel down here. And so if I change this, you should be able to see it change on the screen here. So whereas the plots themselves have colors associated just with the plot itself, labels have to be separated out and put into this global section where this global color can be used by anything in the script. So that's how you use that. We could even get a little fancy and say high range label and low range label. We'll say color.cyan for a high range label and blue for a low range label. Blue is not very good for a label because it's hard to read the value on it. So we'll just go with, I don't know, white in this case. So now we'll say, we'll put a little logic in here to define when each of those colors is used. So right now I'm telling it only to use the high range label color, which is this color.cyan. So I want to tell it where or what case in which to use the other color. What I'm going to say is if the range is greater than or equal to the average, then global color high range label, else global color, and we'll change this to low range label. And so now if we're on a chart that has a low range down in here, then it would show the other color in the label. The next thing that you could do is actually set up some hints beside each of the settings here and tell the user what the setting does so that they know what they're doing as they're changing the settings and everything. So we can do that. If we go in here, there is a keyword called hint. You put a hashtag hint, and then you say, so there are two ways of doing this. You can say hint with a colon beside it, and this is the general hint for the whole script in general. And so I'll show you where that shows up. This is my whole script hint. And then I've got a hint section for each input. So in order to set those, you'll need to say hint, and then the name of the input, and then the colon. And so this is what that needs to look like. And then we can say, okay, the range high price. The hint for that would be choose the highest price of the range. And we can do that for low price as well. Hint range low price, colon, choose the lowest price of the range. And so that's how you do a hint for the whole script and then a hint for two of the inputs here that we have. So when we go out here, you can see that now we've got two tooltips that have shown up for those two inputs. Additionally, you'll see that next to my study out here, there's a whole script tooltip hint. This is my whole script hint. And so you can put whatever you need to put in there, descriptive information and so forth, all in one line. And then the same thing with each of the inputs. So those are some really good things to know. And the next thing you might need to know, labels. You can add additional text. We can say, instead of just having the value plot here, we can add some text before that value. And we can say range, colon, space, and we'll add, this is a concatenate function essentially. We're adding this text to this text. And so now you can see it says range, colon, space, and then it adds in the next value that you have in the string. And you can bring in other values here. If you wanted to bring in the average, we could say, we could add in some text here that said average, colon, space, plus the actual average value. And we'll put that as dollars as well. And so now we can see both the range itself and the average range, and we can compare those. All right, so congratulations, you've made your first high quality indicator in Thinkorswim using the ThinkScript language. I hope this has been valuable to you and helped you understand some of how the ThinkScript language works. And if so, please consider hitting the like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell button that will alert you whenever we put out a new video. I will be posting a new video in the future going over how to do strategies, columns, and scans. So you might want to keep an eye out for those. And I will talk to you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.